Welcome to the call sheet. Today's guest is John Quinn. John Quinn has been an editor for 15 years. He has edited two of the Tales from the Hood sequels, the Blumhouse Hulu project Into the Dark, and his current project is the streaming show The Chosen. Welcome to the call sheet, John Quinn. How are you doing?
Good, man. Good. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here, buddy.
Yeah, it's really great because it's been a little while since I've talked to an editor on the show, and it's such a big important part of the process, but it's also part of the process that very few people really understand. So I really want to talk to you about that.
They think all we do is just cut out the bad parts. I think a lot of people think that they only film what you see, and they don't think that there's like all these other angles and all these other takes and all these other different ways that you could, present scenes to people.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because like people have this impression. We've heard these stories about Alfred Hitchcock, and he storyboards everything and he only shoots exactly what he wants, and the editor is basically taping it together. Have you worked with Alfred Hitchcock?
No, I haven't. And I have to imagine that there's still, I got to imagine that there's still different ways that things could be edited with his stuff. But I don't know, man. It seems like it's very likely that he could have probably just shot only exactly what he needed. He knew exactly what his first cut was going to be and what the second one was going to be. Nowadays, with most films and most directors, they just roll camera on two cameras or more and just figure it out later, what the first shot's going to be in the second shot and so on and so forth.
So tell us a little bit about that. Your process when you're hired on a show. So first of all, for people who don't know, where in the process are you hired? Like, are you hired when they're still in pre-production or when they're shooting?
I should be hired in pre-production. I mean, I should be sent the script and be allowed to give my 2 cents and notes and thoughts, of things that will benefit the edit. And but I usually am hired typically 1 week, 2 weeks before they shoot. That's usually when I'm hired. But I've been hired after the film's been already filmed. I've been hired where the director did a first cut and then they handed it off to me. I've been hired a month or 2 months in advance. I mean, that's the best, when you know that you have a job down the road. That's beautiful. But that rarely ever happens to me.
So how does that work if you are hired in pre-production or sort of early in production and they're currently filming? You don't have obviously all of the film to cut because it's not even shot yet. So what do you do with only part of the movie? How does that work?
You're talking about like when
like day one of shooting, day two you're editing. How do you even know what to cut together?
Well, okay, so I'll use a recent film that I edited for an example. I was brought on to this one film for a director that I've worked with several times, and he really wanted, and my availability was only to do the editor's cut. I was already signed on to do a television series. And so, but I said, I think I have time to do the editor's cut and edit while you guys are shooting. And the reason my director wanted me is because I will send up a red flag when I see, oh, guys, you didn't get this, you didn't get that, this is not going to cut together. You guys got to reshoot this.
During production, you can actually say, we need this shot or that shot.
Yes, there was a horror film that I edited. There was a slasher film I edited where it's basically the climax of the film. Our female hero is on the ground and the killer is coming towards her, and they didn't have that shot looking up at the killer who's coming towards her. We had like a shot from behind him, we had a shot on her, but they didn't, they were running and gunning, and they missed that shot of, the killer moving towards her. And so I sent up a red flag. I contacted the producer, and bam, next thing I know, like 3 days later, they were able to grab it.
Oh, that's awesome. So you would say, for somebody who's making an independent film, it's a good idea, even though it's an extra, month or two of having the editor on the payroll, it could actually save money down the line, because then we don't have to we don't have to do reshoots and gather the crew and get the actors back together.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Done. Yeah, absolutely. No, the editor should be cutting on day one, because and I don't think I don't think it doesn't cost anything extra. Think about it. I mean, like basically when I have done films that have already shot, if they were shooting for 20 days, I tell them, well, I need 20 days to edit, plus an additional 1 to 2 weeks to finesse and deliver a really awesome editor's cut.
So as far as you're concerned, it's the same amount of time. It's just where the time happens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That's
yeah. And that is a difficult thing to do, is to keep up with picture. They shoot for a day and then you have 1 day to edit everything that they shot in that 1 day. It can be tough. It can be tough to hit that deadline, but I make that a deadline that I have to hit.
So I know from working in production, there are days when we shoot 2 pages and some days when we shoot 10 pages. Do you still hold yourself to that? Really?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I really do. I have to cut to picture. Especially because that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's one of the main reasons I'm on while they're shooting, is to say, hey guys, you missed this. I think we really need this. Here's something that on Tales from the Hood 2 and 3, because I had a relationship with the director, Rusty Cundiff, I've worked with him before. I didn't feel like I was overstepping my bounds, but I also made sure that he understood, look, if you don't want me to do this, I won't. But I asked him, do you want me to read the script and make a list of, like, a wish list of insert shots, of close-ups, and things like that? And he said, yeah, go for it. And so
based off of the script before they even started shooting anything.
Yeah. I can read a script and I can usually tell, oh yeah, an insert shot of this or that would, or a cutaway of this or that will definitely help us in case we need to get out of it, in case we need to get out of the scene early or get into the scene late, or if it's just an important plot point. An insert shot can just really save you time also and just help speed things up, or it's a horror film, helps slow things down. And so, I mean, like, look, the cinematographer and the director, they're going to look at the script and they're going to come up with their own shot list and everything. But my director felt like, it's valuable to have that list also for me just giving my 2 cents in. So yeah, I've done that on 3 films with him now, where I read the script and here's my wish list. Do whatever you want with it.
Oh, that's fascinating. So it is good. So even ahead of time, so even before there's anything shot, you're still
it's kind of, I'm trying to be proactive, because it's kind of, the way I see it, it's like, if the footage were to come in and they didn't get an insert shot of this, I'm trying to be proactive and, like, this is what I would probably tell them, guys, I really would like to have this, you missed this.
Wow.
That's whether it's a shot close up of the knife or a close up of a gun and somebody drops it in case it's important that that a bad guy dropped his gun and he no longer has it. It's like, that's important. We need that.
Now, you mentioned cuts. Just to clarify, for people who happen to not know, that's basically the way you refer to a draft of a film, right? There are different kinds. You said editor's cut. What are the various kinds of cuts that you have to concern yourself with? Okay,
so the editor's cut is the very first cut that's put together. Some people call it an assembly. I call it an editor's cut because I feel like the word assembly is an insult, because that editor's cut, the first cut, is the hardest thing to put together. That is the heavy lifting. So first you do an editor's cut, then the director comes in, and then you do a director's cut, and then the producers come in and you do a producer's cut. You might even then do a network cut. And then eventually after that, locked cut. We're locked. The picture is not going to change anymore.
And once picture lock happens, that's when they have to do the sound and the music and, like, ADR. Are you still working on the film at that point, or is somebody else adding those things to the movie?
It depends on the contract. It really depends on the contract or the union contract. If you look at my IMDb, it's like a lot of low budget movies, and they don't have money in the budget to keep the editor on while the mix and everything is being done. But there are certain contracts with the union that says the editor has to stay on until the mix. Okay. Even in those situations though, where I'm most shows where I'm let go as soon as I lock the picture, I usually stay involved, and I come to the sound mix and I go to the music spotting session, which is like my favorite part of the process. To explain what spotting is, like, for instance, music spotting, after you have locked picture, a spotting session is where you, like a music spotting session, is where you sit down with the composer and the producers there and the director, and you watch the movie from beginning to end, and you talk about music. You talk about where music will start, where it will stop, the type of music, the type of mood. You talk about the music that's already in the film, because every movie and TV show will have what is called temp music. Temp music stands for temporary music. Music is usually the last thing done on a film. It's usually not started until you lock picture, but you can't present an editor's cut or a director's cut. You can't present these things dry. You need to have music. So you take scores from, older movies or TV shows, and you drop it in, kind of to represent what you want, what the mood that it evokes, what you hope will be in there, what it'll kind of sound like.
Do you have to do temp stuff for other things like sound effects and
That's too. Yeah, you do sound
color?
effects too. Yeah, I do sound effects, and I rarely mess with the color. Usually, it's already looks okay. The only time I ever mess with color, and I'm definitely not a colorist. The only time I ever mess with color is if it's like a flashback or something stylized.
Oh, okay.
I'm not, but I'm no, I'm not a colorist.
I gotcha.
Can't, yeah.
So when the after day one, and they've shot everything, everything's going ideally, they shot something, and they sent you a hard drive for you to like work with. What is your process? Do you look at the script, or do you ignore the script? Do you look at the editor's notes? Does the director communicate with you in any way? Like how does that work? Because he or she is busy working on set, shooting day two. What do you do?
I really wish, I really wish, what I would love to have happen, this doesn't happen, but I really someday want to have a director after each scene, go to the script supervisor and just talk for like a few minutes and tell me through the script supervisor, okay, this is my vision for the scene. This is just tell me, what you're thinking. This is how this is going to be cut, because that doesn't happen. It's just the footage just arrives. And
I read some interesting advice in a director's manual one time, and it was for TV directing. And what this woman suggested, and what she apparently did has been doing in television for years, is she will tell the script supervisor to note which shot is supposed to be the first shot of the scene, and where the very first cut is. And she said that would then tell the editor where every other cut is from that point forward, that the first cut was the important one, and then everything else the editor would understand by implication.
Oh, that sounds awesome. I've worked on films where there are there's some directors where the footage comes in and it speaks to me, and it's so easy to cut. It's like, oh, they obviously shot this way. It's so obvious that this is the shot to use for the opening of the scene. And sometimes it's obvious, oh, they just grabbed this part of the end because obviously that's how they want to end it. And it's wonderful when that stuff comes in. And it's wonderful when sometimes what they'll do is it'll be obvious that, oh, they also shot this a certain way just in case that one thing doesn't work to open the scene. They shoot it a different way. And it's great when you have too many great choices. But you were asking about like how I tack a scene first, or how that
like what is the first thing? Do you do a master shot first and then start just slapping inserts on top of it, or do you do each cut at a time? How do you
Everything's different. Every show is different. I'm always actually trying to learn from other editors as well, and just trying out different things. It's different every time. But okay, I'll try and quickly talk about my last gig and my current gig and how I attack a scene. The last gig, it was a film, and basically what I would do is I would watch the last take of each setup, and I would watch the entire cut so it gets burnt into my brain. And then now that I know exactly what all the different angles and choices I have, then I just start cutting it, and I start with the first angle where it's obvious to me, oh, this is how they want to start. And then I think about the next angle, what's the next angle? And then I just look at it until I find what I think is the best section. Also, though, sometimes I'll start looking at I'll start looking at the last take and kind of work my way backwards, because sometimes this director would shoot things at the the last few angles would be just certain sections that he shot only for this moment, this beat.
So it's a shot that's not the entire length of the
it's
scene.
not the entire,
it's just
okay. Exactly. He only shot it just for this moment. And so it's like, that's it. Don't use any of the other stuff, even though you have all these other angles where that same moment happens. No, it's obvious that this angle is shot for just that moment. So many times I'll just kind of work my way backwards also, where I'll just work my way backwards and kind of, okay, I'm going to throw this into the timeline, because when I get to that point,
he obviously wants that.
Yeah.
Now, I know, like, way back in film history, there was a thing called circle take, where the director would tell the script supervisor, circle this one and we'll print that take, and they wouldn't actually print the other bits of film because it was a waste of money. But nowadays everything's on a hard drive and it's just ones and zeros, so you get all of the footage. Do you ever use stuff that the director didn't say, this is the take I want? Or
yeah, I do. Yeah. Well, so I'll tell you about The Chosen. Okay. The director and showrunner, Dallas Jenkins, he doesn't do circle takes. He doesn't do those. He doesn't do circle takes. Sometimes they're called preferred takes. Never does that.
Is there a reason why? What's his philosophy behind that?
Don't know what his philosophy is. I don't know. The guy's a mad genius. And then Rusty Cundiff, on the last film that I did with him, as an example, he does do preferred takes. And so I have my assistant editor. So Rusty tells the script supervisor, this is my preferred take, or it's a circle take, and the script supervisor notes it in some way, right? And then I have my assistant editor do an asterisk for each take that is a circle take, so that I don't have to go looking at the facing pages. Back in the day, for the most part, I never looked at this. I mean, I would read the script.
Sure.
Then when the footage would come in, I'm just running and gunning. I'm not even looking at the script. I'm just, I'm just going off of the footage, what the footage is telling me. And sometimes I'll look at it if something doesn't make sense.
Now,
but that's changed.
Right.
Changed. I now, like right now I'm on The Chosen season 3, and season 1 and 2, I was just running and gunning. I was the only editor of all 8 episodes. But now I have a second editor. And so now, now I have a little bit more time where I can, I make sure that I know exactly all the beats that, that are happening, that are specified in the script. I make sure that happens.
Now, you've worked with some directors or producers that were also writers, and sometimes you've worked on films where the writer was long gone by the time they were actually shooting.
Yeah.
How does that affect you as an editor, whether you have access to the writer or not?
Interesting. I never have access to the.
Oh, you never
like.
Not even like a writer director or a writer producer, like.
If it's a writer director, of course, then obviously I'm talking to the writer. If it's the director, but basically I only talk to the director. I rarely ever talk to the writer.
Does it feel different when you're talking to a writer director versus just a guy who's just a director?
No, it doesn't, because it's the by that point I feel like the director has made it their own. It is their vision, even if they weren't the writer. On The Chosen, the head writer, what we were doing on season 2 is me and the showrunner Dallas, we would get the show to basically Dallas's liking, but then we would do one more pass and we bring in the head writer, and just get his feedback, and see if he sends up a red flag of something doesn't seem to work. So I would say on The Chosen, that's one of the only times that I've had interaction with the writer. But the writers Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John for The Chosen.
No. But one more question about like your actual creative process. One of the trickier parts of editing, I think for everybody, but especially people that are like starting out, is a dialogue scene. It seems like everybody's natural instinct is to just, this person's talking, so the camera should be on them, and then this person's talking, so the camera should be on them. But a more sophisticated editor obviously starts doing things where the dialogue starts before the cut, or the dialogue continues after the cut, which for our viewers, if you haven't heard the terms, they're called J and L cuts because of the way it looks on a timeline. It looks like a capital J or a capital L. How do you approach that as an editor? Is that something you're doing like from the get-go when you were talking about just laying all the scenes out, or is that something you do as you're refining it, or how do you get into that creatively?
So for the most part, the way I used to do dialogue scenes is, and this I got this from another editor like 20 years ago when I was like a post PA. This editor said that the way they do dialogue scenes is, and this is how I decide who I'm going to be on. Basically, you have a scene between 2 or 3 people and they're talking. Imagine that you're in the room watching people talk, okay, having this dialogue. When you are in a situation in real life where you're watching people talk, you're not always looking at the person that's talking. Many times you're looking at the person that's listening. And so that's kind of how I judge who I'm going to be on and when I'm going to be on them and when I'm going to be off them. Basically, I will choose the best performance for each line or line run. And then I go and figure out who I'm going to be on. Who would I be looking at?
So the dialogue comes first and then the picture comes second if it's a dialogue scene.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so The Chosen is basically nothing but dialogue. It's nothing but people talking. And so we have a setup where it's a lot of work, but I'm telling you, it's been so valuable. It's very time consuming for our assistant editor. So what we have our assistant editor do is a line by line, or some people call it a string out or a dialogue string out. So basically what happens is if you have a dialogue between 2 people, say it's Matt and John, and Matt says, "Hey, John, how are you doing?" The assistant editor will take every angle of every take, and you'll see Matt say 10, 20 times, "Hey, John, how you doing? Hey, John, how you doing? Hey, John," you know.
So the wide, the 2-shot, the close-up, all on a wow.
Yeah. Right? And then it'll be the next line, next set of lines. If John says, "Oh, Matt, I'm doing okay, but I'm pretty tired. I'm going to go home now." It's going to be every take of John of every angle saying, "No, I'm feeling okay, but I think I'm kind of tired. I'm going to go home now. I think I'm okay." Right. And there's a little space and there's a marker that tells you what the line is, so that when you go looking for it, if you need to go looking for it later on. And so the way I did the first couple seasons of The Chosen was basically I would just go with whatever the best performance is for each beat, for each run of lines. For me in the beginning, that was more important than the angle. You know, whatever's the best performance. If the best performance happens to be in the wide, then I go with the wide. If it happens to be in the close-up, I go with the close-up. I just go with whatever was the best performance.
Wow.
And so the reason this was very valuable later is that Dallas many times would just want to see other line readings. And so instead of me, so if I'm in a remote session or if I'm in person with my director, if he or she wants to see a bunch of line readings, if I have this line reading timeline, I can just, within 45 seconds, I can find it. Reveal bin, go to the string out, boom, 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 boom. There's the line. Here they all are. What's your favorite? You know, sometimes the video might be good, but the audio of the performance sucks. So once again, you go to the line by line and you can we'll just listen to what's the best reading of that line, and then just take that audio and put it into the actor's mouth on the video that looks good.
That's amazing. I've never even heard of that. So your poor assistant editor has to do this before you even show up for work. Is your assistant editor, are they working overnight? How is that?
So on The Chosen, basically, like day one, they say they film on day one on a Monday. Day two on Tuesday, my assistant editor gets that day one footage on Tuesday, and they have that whole day to organize it to my liking and do the line by lines.
I see. So
so then on Wednesday morning, it's all ready for me to go.
So you finish day one's editing when they are finished shooting day three, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So a minute ago, you mentioned being a post PA. So that's a good point. I want to go back to the beginning of your career. You've been an editor for over 15 years, but you did not emerge from the womb as an editor.
No.
So what was your well, I guess first of all, did you know you wanted to be an editor, or were you just sort of open to anything? Like how did you get into post-production in the first place?
Yeah. Okay. So when I was in like fifth or sixth grade, my family got a video camera, it was VHS, and I started making stupid movies with my friends. What's interesting is that the first movie I ever made with my buddy Joey, it was a slasher film. It was a movie called The Killer That Wouldn't Die. But what I was doing was I was doing in-camera editing. I would like do a countdown, and they would know when I got to, when I would point or whatever, I would hit record, and then they would do what they're supposed to do. Then I would hit stop on the recorder. Then I would move to a different angle and then do it all, do it again. I wasn't editing. I did it only once. And if we screwed up, I would rewind the videotape and then.
Now, was this the limitation of the technology at the time, or were you not aware that editing existed?
I wasn't aware that I guess I could have shot a bunch of footage and then connected it to a VCR. I guess I could have done that. Eventually I wound up doing that. So since fifth grade, so I just making stupid movies with my friends just to have fun. I don't know, that's what I did. I loved movies. I thought I wanted to be a film critic. I was in sixth grade and I'm writing on the family typewriter, writing movie reviews.
So you were like a lot of people, I think, were messing around with cameras and stuff as a teenager. Did you then go to film school? Or did you skip all that? How did that go for you?
Oh yeah. So basically, when I was in high school, the thought of what I was going to do for my future, I was pretty depressed and felt aimless, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. There's nothing I can do. And then I took TV broadcasting. My high school happened to have a TV broadcasting class. I had a most amazing teacher, Jim Francois, and he
still remember.
He was him and this class changed my life. I fell in love with editing. That's where he was so cool about just letting you come in after school and messing around with the 3/4 inch editors and the 2 VCRs and taking out video cameras and shooting and kind of creating your own projects. He would, dictate stuff to us, but also he would, if we had ideas of different projects we wanted to do, he was very open to that. And then one day he had, and I'm really loving editing. But I still thinking, what am I going to do for college? I'm not like an honor student at all. And then a former student came to the class, and she was a grip on a White Zombie music video. And she talked about a film school she went to, Columbia College Chicago. And then I started talking to, Mr. Francois about Columbia College Chicago. And suddenly it became clear to me, maybe I could make a career and become an editor, become a film editor. And so, I went to film school, and my concentration right from the beginning was editing. That's what I wanted to do. And so I went to film school, and I saved up enough money to where, I'd be okay for a few months here in California. I only had 2 friends living in California, but they weren't working in the film industry, or they weren't able to, help me get my foot in the door. So I moved out here anyway. And I reached out. What I had done was I reached out to someone that went to Columbia College Chicago, who spoke at my school, and they were they were an assistant editor at the time, and they were starting to move up to editing. And, I just reached out to him, and we had lunch, and, a week or 2 later, someone happened to text him saying, hey, we're looking for a post-production assistant. Do you know anybody? And he was like, well, I just had lunch with this guy, John. Maybe he'll be okay. And so that was a Robert Altman film. And so I couldn't believe I'm working on a Robert Altman film.
Your
I mean,
first movie was a Robert Altman
Robert
film?
Altman film, and I took a class on Robert Altman, and I
Right.
was a huge fan of, shortcuts and The Player, and it was very surreal. Mind you, I'm at the bottom of the film production totem pole. I'm getting coffee and breakfast and lunch for people, but it was a small totem pole. You know what I mean? It was.
Tell us, for people who don't know, like what is that totem pole in post production?
Oh yeah. So the totem pole is, you have the editor. What's interesting is that you have the editor, but you also have the post supervisor, and the post supervisor is an interesting position because they're kind of doing stuff to help the editor, but they're kind of above the editor. But at the same time, the editor kind of will tell the post supervisor, well, I need this and I need that. It's an interesting relationship. But basically, you have the editor, and then you have an assistant editor. If you're a big film, you'll have an apprentice editor. You might even have some visual effects editors who only work on visual effects. And then you'll have the post PA.
And that's it.
And that's it. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. You'll see, crews will have upwards of over 100, 200 people, and it all comes down to just 5 people. If you work in the low budget world like I have for so long, it comes down to 2 people usually.
So how long? And it's different for everybody, obviously. But how long were you an assistant fetching coffee before you were able to be an assistant editor who was actually a hands on the computer and actually doing stuff?
Yeah. It was for well over 2 years. It was about 2.5 years that I was a post PA. I worked on a Robert Altman film. And by the way, I don't want to make it sound like, oh, I moved out to California and bam, I had lunch with someone and bam, I got this job. I mean, for the first few months I got some job interviews, 8 of them. Didn't get any of those 8 jobs. I received 2 rejection letters. I kept those. I have one of the rejection letters somewhere that I still have. I think you got to be a little crazy to think you can come out here and things are going to happen. But I felt like, no, I'm going to make it. I'm going to keep this rejection letter and I'll show them. But anyways, by the way, after I worked on that Robert Altman film, I went back to Chicago. I'm from Chicago. I worked and I went back for 2 weddings, and I stayed in Chicago for a month. And I didn't have a job lined up, and I actually had a panic attack. I was watching a Cubs game, and I had a panic attack. It felt like I was having a heart attack, and the reason I had that panic attack is I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm going back to LA, and I don't have a job. I don't know if I'm ever going to work again. It wasn't a given that I was going to get another movie. But I did. Then I got on a John Woo film. It was a World War II movie. And I was the post PA on that. And that lasted, I don't know, it was almost like 2 years, year and a half, 2 years. And then it was through a friend who I met through, a friend who was a Columbia College Chicago alumni. He was working for this company that was making movies for Sci-Fi Channel. He was an assistant editor. And an assistant editor position opened up, and I got the job. So, and I got in there.
So then you became the person who was working overnight or ahead of the editor, getting everything lined up the way that the editor
lined up for them, however they liked it. Yeah.
So is there a standard way that happens, or does every editor have to like train their assistant editor? This is the way I want my bins arranged. And
yeah, you know what? Every editor is different. Every editor is different. It's if any of your listeners are interested in this type of thing, editing, there's a book called Art of the Cut by Stephen Holfish. And what's great about that book is that instead of it being like 20 chapters and each chapter is an interview with a different editor, instead the book features interviews with probably 50 or more editors, but each chapter is broken down by organization, how they like their project organized. And so in that chapter, you hear from like 20 different editors talking about how they like their project organized. And by reading that book, you find out quickly every editor is different.
Right.
Everybody has their own way of doing things. So I have my own way of doing things.
So when you're as the editor, what is your process for finding an assistant editor? What do you, first of all, how do you even like find them? Which for our audience, the reverse is how do they find you? But like, what is your way of vetting them and making sure that you think you'll be able to work together before you even start this like little training process that you apparently have to do every single time. How do you find these people?
That's interesting. Well, you know what's really interesting, I'll tell your listeners, is that many times the assistant editor is hired before the editor.
Oh,
I've had many jobs where I had no say in who my assistant editor was.
oh gosh, why does
Yeah,
that happen?
that's the low budget world. Mainly because you know the train is rolling and on a film or TV show, and you need to that workflow needs to be worked out, just how the footage is going to get from set into the Avid. And so many times if they don't have the editor, bam, they got to hire someone.
Oh,
So but with regards to me, how do I find an assistant editor? You know, the few times where I've gotten to choose, it's really not that, hasn't been that often, but when I do get to choose, it's usually because I've worked with somebody, or I will ask around. I've never posted on Facebook. Granted, it does happen. There are Facebook groups out there like, I need an assistant editor, I need a union assistant editor, I need an editor. There's Facebook groups like that for that. But I would go to my circle of friends who are editors, and I would ask them if they know anybody. Before, there was a time when I wasn't looking for somebody, where an editor friend of mine just said, hey, I had this kid who was a post PA and he really was great, and he seems to know Avid. Actually, if something ever opens up, let me know. And like 2 months, 3 months later, I remembered hearing about this kid, and when a job opened up, I'm like, okay, let's bring him in, let's get him interviewed, and he got the job.
What is your so if someone somehow figures out a way to get into that interview process, however they friend of a friend process, what exactly are you looking for when you're talking to them?
What I'm looking for is, I'm looking for someone that's very organized, that's very thorough. Someone, for me personally, someone that knows After Effects or knows visual effects. Someone that's good with sound effects editing, that type of thing.
How do you find these things out in the interview, or do they just tell you?
It's more like,
is there a way that
by asking them? It's really just asking them what their experience is. What software do they know? And then vetting, and then getting their references and calling these people.
Oh, so you do follow up.
Oh yeah, you have to. And also the people that they list as their references, I'm looking them up on IMDb as well, to make sure that they've worked on projects that where it counts.
Right.
And so that's generally been the process, I guess. But yeah, you'd be surprised, more often than not, the assistant editors already hired.
Oh, okay. So you went from a PA, post PA, to an assistant editor. How did you get your first job as a, because I know we're editing things on your own, but how did you get your first job editing? How did you convince somebody to let you actually do the cutting?
Okay, yeah. So I'm working at that place that's making Sci-Fi Channel movies. By the way, this is before the Asylum. I wasn't working for the Asylum. Nothing against the Asylum. Nothing against the Sharknado movies, but this was before that. So the budgets were a little bit higher. So anyways, in my free time, as an assistant editor, in my free time, I would do gag scenes. I would not gag reels. I would take, for instance, there was an alien movie, and I would take the footage and I would create a love story between these two aliens, even though that's not what the movie was about. I would just do gag, silly stuff and make, just create something out of nothing and tell a different story. And it was usually very juvenile and immature, but funny. And so I had a post supervisor who, was one of the people I would show this stuff to, because he had a great sense of humor. We both were similar in that. And so one of the editors at this place that, was, basically these were staff positions, which isn't normal at all. But this company was making so many movies that were coming through there. They had staff editors and staff assistant editors. So one of the editors was jumping ship. They were leaving the company. And so they had to find another editor. And so my post supervisor said, well, how about John, to the producer? And they were like, well, how do you know he can edit? No, we should find someone else. And he brought up like, no, I've seen what he can do, creating something out of nothing. He could edit something and make it tell a different story. I'm pretty sure John is capable of this. And so, yeah, Larry Ferguson is his name, and Larry went to bat for me. And And yeah, I got moved up, and I got paid very little. They gave me a very small bump in pay because, and I basically told them I agreed. Like, if you guys don't think I can do this, then I'm fine. I'll go back to being an assistant editor. But I totally delivered.
So the little side projects help, basically.
Yeah.
That's how you proved that you could do it.
Yeah.
But so actually that sort of brings up a question now as the editor. Do you ever find yourself in that situation where maybe they didn't get all the footage, or like it was it got rained out and so they had to cut a scene? And have you ever in your professional editing career had to put something together that was not the original intention because of circumstances?
Oh yeah, that's totally happened. It happens a lot on low budget movies, which is my experience. Big budgeted films, they don't shoot something, it's no problem. They have the money to do all pickups and insert shots and stuff like that, and reshoot scenes and stuff like that, but not on these films that I've done. So there was this movie I did. It was a ghost movie, and they did not shoot the climax of the film. They didn't shoot what happened to the bad guy. And the director thought they were going to shoot it in a pool. Like they were filming this movie in Bulgaria, and he thought because they didn't get it, he was almost promised, oh yeah, we'll shoot it in a pool in LA. That wasn't going to happen. And so what's supposed to happen is the villain has knocked the good guys, the two remaining survivors, off this boat, and it was all him. And then he looks down at the boat and he sees these demons, and he screams, "I'm supposed to survive, take them." And then these things were supposed to come out of the water and attack him on the boat, and there's a whirlpool, and boom, he's destroyed. But they didn't shoot they didn't shoot the footage of the demons that are supposed to come out of the water. I mean, granted that they were CGI, but they didn't shoot him, the creatures coming out and him falling back. They didn't shoot any of that. So what I did was I took the footage that they had filmed, and I stole a shot that they did not shoot intentionally. There's a shot before they called action. There was a shot that was looking down at the water that just happened to look like a POV. So I go to the POV. I use this shot, stole it as a POV, and I had VFX CGI creatures come out of the water. And then
this was like before the slate.
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
Okay.
Before they called action.
Oh, okay.
I think they might have run slate because the shot looked good, but they hadn't called action. I think what was about to happen in that shot is the hero was about to be pushed into the water. And so now I need footage of him getting attacked, falling backwards, right? And so what I did was, there was a shot in the movie where he's laughing and he goes like this. He brings his head backwards and then he brings it forward. But if you rewound it, played it backwards, and did a little bit of a speed change, it almost looked like he was being hurled backwards and that a creature was coming at him. So I had them do CGI by playing the shot backwards. And now I need one more shot where he's falling backwards into the boat, and where he's screaming. Well, I have a shot of there's one take we haven't used where after he's kicked the good guys out of the boat, he's laughing. And he kind of falls back and he's laughing. But if you look at it from a certain certain point of view, it looks like he could be screaming.
If you play
backwards, or no, I didn't play backwards because he did fall back. And if you add CGI over him, it looks like he's not laughing. It looks like he's screaming and being attacked.
And you just add the screaming sound effect instead of the laughing sound effect. And
yeah.
That's
you gotta do what you got, whatever you can, man. That's one of the things that I try to tell in interviews is, why I should be hired, because like I've had so much experience solving problems where they didn't have money to fix them,
So you've done a lot of horror movies, because from the trajectory of your career. If you look at your IMDb page, it's full of horror films.
Yeah.
And you I know personally are a fan, so you're actually getting to work on the kind of things you like. But now you're working on the Chosen, which is a big hit show, and people love it. And it's obviously not horror. For anybody who hasn't seen it, it's essentially a broadening adaptation of the Gospels. It's much longer. You know, most I was listening to somebody talking about it the other day that, you know, when you do a movie version of it, you kind of have the structure where Jesus is giving, you know, his he's preaching, and then the Sanhedrin get upset, and then he gets executed, and then the resurrection. That's the end of the movie. And every Jesus movie has to be that because that's the story. But The Chosen is planned to be, I think, 7 seasons, right?
Yeah, 7 seasons.
So it's not that, like, they've expanded the story a great deal. There's a lot of stuff that's not, it's not irreverent, but it's not in the Bible. Like, the writers have created a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, creative.
Yeah, and one great thing about it is it's very funny. Like, there's a lot of, like, joke, not like, it's not silly, but like, there's funny and there's humor, which would make sense. Jesus was a great preacher. Most great preachers are funny, like that sort of stuff. And it seems to most people that that's like the opposite end of the kinds of things that you were doing, which were scary. How do you think that, it's not even like a think, you obviously know, how did that happen where you went from one very different genre, you went from like horror movies to a biblical television show that is uplifting and funny? How did that happen? That seems like the craziest.
It happened because the showrunner, the series creator, the director, Dallas Jenkins, is definitely thinking outside the box. So what happened was, it just happened. So what happened with me getting that show and meeting Dallas was, I was supposed to pick up footage for a Christmas movie. I was doing my first Christmas movie. It was sort of a modern day retelling of A Christmas Carol, and the footage wasn't ready, but I went to the post facility anyway, because I was friends with the receptionist, and I was just going to visit and say hello because I got her the job there and everything. And so it just so happened that Dallas was in the building, and he was in town looking for an editor. And so the owner of the company had called me up. He was about to ask me to come in, and it just so happens I was already in the building. So the owner of the post facility told me about this show, The Chosen. You know, they're looking for an editor.
And this is the first season. No one's seen that.
So that's not a hit. I mean, nobody had heard it. Nobody knew anything about anything. And so I looked up Dallas. I stalked him on Facebook. I saw what he looked like. I saw we had mutual friends. And he's coming up the stairs, and I said, "Hi, are you Dallas Jenkins?" And he says, "Yes, I am." And I said, "Hi, I'm John Quinn." And he says, "John Quinn." He opens up his phone, he goes to his email, and he tells me, "Your agent submitted you for my TV show 2 hours ago." He clicks on the email, he looks at my resume. At the top is Tales from the Hood 2. And he says, "Tales from the Hood 2, huh?" And I'm like, yeah, what are you going to do? And so we go and sit down in the conference room, and we talk shop for 2 hours. It turns out my horror film background was a plus to him.
Really?
Because there was an exorcism scene in episode 1 of season 1.
Oh,
so
interesting.
Yeah. And if you listen to Dallas talk, he said this in an interview, that what he was looking for in an editor was also someone that was like a film geek, someone that was like a big film nerd. And horror film people tend to be big film nerd, big film geeks, and I was. So surprisingly, a show, a biblical historical drama about Jesus and the disciples, my horror film background wasn't a negative thing. I think it would be for a lot of people, but that would be making this type of show, but it wasn't for him, and I'm very thankful that it wasn't, because I've been turned down for work because they look at my reel, they look at my credits, and it's like, oh, he's a horror film guy, he can't possibly do this comedy series. Cutting comedy, so much of it is just about timing and not ruining the joke, and so much of cutting horror is about timing and not ruining the suspense, and it's about feeling it. For the most part with comedy, as far as I'm concerned, you either you have a performance and a moment happen that is funny, or you don't. I just feel like if it's funny, you just got to stay out of the way and make sure that you don't ruin the timing, because usually something is funny because nobody's expecting it. And at the same time with horror, something is scary sometimes, like jump scares, because you're not expecting it. So in a way, you want to find that thing that's funny, you think that is funny, and try and not ruin it. And a lot of it has to do with the lead up and leading up to and not ruining that joke. So a lot of it has to do with what comes beforehand and just kind of working backwards from that scare or that comedy beat, you know. But for me with comedy, like, yeah, my basic feeling is just stay out of the way if it is funny, because you can't really create something funny from editing, I don't think, you know, except unless it's, you know, one of those not jump scares, but a cut to like, where it's just something unexpected and it's funny and it's sort of a
Gilligan
jump laugh in a way.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. I never heard of that. That does.
I just coined that phrase, jump laugh.
So you've worked on films, like some of your favorite projects have been films, but the Chosen is a television show, and it's a great show. There's got to be different demands on the editor, where you're working on one sort of succinct beginning, middle, and end versus working on 8 episodes that keep going, and hopefully for seasons and seasons. How do you approach that differently? How does it affect your job differently?
Well, it's you have to really know the story of the television show. Like, you got to know what it's all leading up to. How's this episode leading into the next episode, leading into the next episode? The thing about the Chosen and versus films, basically, it's basically like I'm cutting 4 movies over the course of 9 months with the Chosen. They're shooting all 8 episodes all at once, so the footage is
really?
coming in. Yeah, it's not shot in order. As far as, it's not like they shoot episode 1 and 2 and then they shoot episode 3 and 4. On season 2, we didn't get the final scenes for episode 1 until the second to the last day of filming.
Oh gosh.
And then in order to make it out in time for Easter, we had to lock picture like 3 days after they wrapped.
Oh,
it's
wow.
Crazy. And because we only have one director, and that's the showrunner, the series creator, Dallas Jenkins, because we have him, it's not like he's coming in giving notes and we're working on the edit. I think they're shooting for over 80 days on season 3, and for the most part, I won't have time to work with him, or he won't have time to work with me until they wrap in September.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, and some of the other, is that how the other TV shows that you worked on, did they work in a similar way?
Actually, you know what's interesting? No, I have done shows that were like that, where they shot everything over the course of 40 to 80 days. But I've also had that experience. I've had that experience. Oh man, I had that experience on a show, a horror series, where, one day after they wrap, bam, director's cut. You're working on the director's cut. And the director only has 1 day.
Oh, geez.
And then it goes off to the network. I mean, this was crazy. Yeah, there was a show that started shooting, I believe, in September, and they delivered it so that it was able to air in November, because it was a Christmas horror anthology. And 8 episodes were done in 10 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, that was crazy.
So you've done kind of everything that an editor can do at this point.
I've cut a couple documentaries. Just not animation. That's the only thing I haven't done.
So what would you, for someone who's just starting out, what would your advice be to them? That's because you've been at it for a long time. It's the industry has changed and the technology has changed. The available technology has changed since the time that you were starting out. What would you, somebody who's either in film school or just graduating, what would you suggest to them? What should they be doing with their time right now while they're looking for work? What do you think is a good thing for them to do?
I think it's studying the craft and editing. I think physically editing things. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a music video or do what I did, which was, I was such a nerd that I would cut music videos of films from my favorite films. I would do stuff like that. I say learning the technology, learning After Effects, learning visual effects, and being in a huge part of it though is also being social. making friends and networking. And many people think networking is going to events and handing out business cards. And I've never gotten a gig like that. I've only gotten gigs where from friendships, you know. So I would say that in their, what they should be doing in their free time is also, you know, yeah, working on relationships and friendships. And if an opportunity, if a young person is told by someone that they, you know, that is doing what they want to do, if they say keep in touch, or yeah, let's get coffee sometime or whatever, don't let that, you know, don't pass up that opportunity. I also you know, teach sometimes, and I taught a horror film class, a editing horror film class, and this big time film editor came in, and at the end of the Q&A, he told the students, you know, that when they graduate or you know, if they want to get in touch with him, you know, he's totally down for grabbing coffee with them. He told them, you know, just get in touch with John, and then I'll, you know, connect them. And not one of those 12 students has taken him up on that offer. Nobody has reached out to me to get in touch with him. Granted, you know, the pandemic happened and everything, but still, you know, nobody took advantage of that. And I think that's what a lot of people aren't doing. A lot of young people don't take advantage of these incredible opportunities that they have to meet with people, you know.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice, because there's the job at hand, whether it's editing or cinematography or writing, whatever it is, but it's such a collaborative medium, whether it's television or film or music videos. You still need to be able to work with people, and that's you have to practice that as much as anything else.
Yeah, you know, and everybody always says, oh, you know, it's all about who you know in Hollywood, you know, that's how you get ahead. But it's like, yeah, here's the thing. If you suck at your job, nobody's going to want to know you. But if you kick butt, people will want to know you. People will take notice. If you're the post PA and your job is just getting donuts, then be the best you can be at getting those donuts, because somebody will notice that.
That's a great point to end on. That making friends, doing your best to be a friendly, approachable person on top of being a good editor. That's how you're going to make it in this business.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you, John, for being on our show. Thank you for sharing your advice and your years of experience with everyone. And hopefully this will be as entertaining and useful for everyone else watching this as it was for me. So thanks for coming on.
Cool. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah.
Really, it's an honor. Thanks a lot, buddy. Appreciate it.
Have a good one.
Yeah.